Number 5. The Conjuring. The Conjuring is a 2013 horror film directed by James Wan, written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. It is the first film in the Conjuring universe franchise and also based on real events surrounding the Perron family's demonic experiences. Ed was a World War II vet and a former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist. Lorraine, a self-claimed clairvoyant, making them the best demonic duo out there. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research. They quickly gained notoriety as respected investigators after this case. The Perrons. In 1971, the Perron family moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Rhode Island where Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters began to notice odd things happening almost immediately. First, missing items, salt shaker, broom, then some ghostly sightings. Then, well, you'll see. It was discovered that the home had experienced some previous sinister owners, self-immolation, deadly accidents, and of course, murder in the attic. One violent and destructive spirit named Bathsheba. Quote, "Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of this house, and she resented the competition of my mother posed for that position." Andrea Perron, the oldest daughter. Bathsheba Sherman, who lived on the Perrons' property circa 1800s, was rumored to have been a Satanist and involved in the murder of a neighbor. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, there were numerous spirits that lived on the premises. The smell of rotten meat, beds levitating, and of course, the dirt-covered, abysmally cold basement. The Perrons asked the Warrens to come in more than 10 separate times on 10 separate occasions to help out their ghost problem. Lorraine conducted a seance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing them, to which during the seance Carolyn Perron was possessed. The family swear that she was speaking in tongues and even rising from the ground, sitting in a chair. Andrea said, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not of her own. Then her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." Yeah, that's all the ingredients you need for an amazing horror movie universe to me. Terrifying. Number 4. Annabelle. The infamous Annabelle. We know her. The most haunted doll on Earth. First appearing in The Conjuring in 2013, then Annabelle Creation, then Annabelle Comes Home. I'm just waiting for part 4. Annabelle vs. Anderson Silva, UFC 279 live from Las Vegas. Yo, I'm straight up punting a haunted doll if it runs up on me, I'll tell you that for free. The film was inspired by the story of a doll named Annabelle, told by Ed and Lorraine Warren after obtaining and ridding its evil from its toy-like body. The doll is apparently responsible for 2 near-death experiences, 1 fatal accident, and a string of demonic activity. The doll's origins come from a gift to a young nurse named Donna from her mother for her 28th birthday. Donna brought it back to her apartment she shared with a roommate. Pretty normal Raggedy Ann doll. Then the two began to notice she'd move around on her own. They even started finding notes left around saying, "Help me," written on parchment paper, which they had no clue to even where to buy that or find that. Before long, they called in some help from a medium who insisted that the doll was harboring a spirit who had lived and perished on the grounds prior to their building being built. Medium called the priest called his father called Ed and Lorraine. So yeah, this thing is like haunted. You know when priests are like, oh god, no! Yeah, that's usually not a really good sign. Spirits do not possess inanimate objects like houses or toys. They possess people. An inhuman spirit can attach itself to a place or object, and this is what occurred in the Annabelle case. This spirit manipulated the doll and created the illusion of it being alive in order to get recognition. Truly, the spirit was not looking to stay attached to the doll, it was looking to possess a human host. Thank the gods, Ed and Lorraine locked her up in the occult museum where she lays to this day. Just waiting. Number 3. The Haunting in Connecticut. The Haunting in Connecticut is the first of the Warren universe of horror and is based on all real cases and points. A 2009 gem, it accounts the horrific paranormal case of the Snedekers, who moved into a ghost-infested house in Southington, Connecticut. Carmen and Alan Snedeker, their 3 sons, their daughter, and 2 nieces, all unwillingly now pray for the other side. The eldest Snedeker son unfortunately was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the family moved to Connecticut to be closer to the doctors. What they weren't initially aware of was that the home they were renting was once a funeral parlor. Yeah, tools and bloody furniture just lay as they once did, untouched. Mom notices items going missing, that's just the start. The children start to see strange people in their home at night, specifically a man with long black hair. Their son's drastic personality change, which included violent outbursts and attacks on his family, was then diagnosed with schizophrenia. No one was convinced, though. It was agreed that maybe he was becoming a victim to the house's grim history after all. After weeks in the home to get the full demonic experience, the Warrens came to the conclusion that the morticians that worked on the home previously had practiced some abysmally sinister acts on the lifeless bodies, deepening the home in a twisted, dark origin. After Ed and Lorraine were called in to clean it up, an exorcism or two, and the house finally became a home again. The case can be reimagined in 2009's Haunting in Connecticut, where the story follows the truth the Snedekers experienced all those years ago. It's pretty scary, yeah. Number 2, The Nun, the 2018 spin-off film and prequel to The Conjuring 2. A demon nun channeling an evil spirit named Valak. The Nun serves as an origin story of sorts within the Warren universe. Sister Irene and priest Father Burke travel to investigate a monastery in 1952 Romania after the Vatican learns of an accident and summons the father to investigate. According to the Lesser Key of Solomon from the 17th century, Valak is the Grand President of Hell. Valak's look in both films were inspired by an experience Lorraine had shortly after investigating the Amityville horror house in 1976. Lorraine was at home in her bed reading when she felt a presence. She saw a black whirlwind of dark mass enter the room. It was like a vortex. Lorraine prayed to be released from the forces of evil. She told it, "Leave and go back where you came from," over and over again. It vanished, but she never forgot. And cue scary movie. Yeah, apparently while investigating the once very haunted Borley Rectory, the most haunted spot in the UK, Lorraine had a run-in with a sinister nun. They ended up coming face to face with the churchyard's ghost, who was, according to lore, a nun buried alive behind the brick walls of the convent centuries ago after having an affair. Apparently Ed took photos on his camera of the Borley Rectory ghosts as they encountered them. Quote, "It was pitch black and there were no lit candles or lights. Photographers snapped photos on a 35mm camera with infrared film. When they developed the images, what appeared to be a spectral nun was seen walking down the aisle praying." And number 1, part 2, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. Sounds like a lame Satanist excuse, doesn't it? Actually, now a term of phrase pleaded before a court of law. Yeah, who knew? Could possession under demonic circumstances prove innocence over acts performed while under? This is the 8th installment of the Conjuring universe. The plot is as follows. It's 1981. Ed and Lorraine documented the exorcism of 8-year-old David Glatzel, attended by his family, his sister Debbie, her boyfriend Arn Johnson, and Father Gordon of Connecticut. During the exorcism, Arn invites the demon to enter his body instead of remaining in the boy's. The family, including the Warrens, witnessed the demon transport itself from David's body to Arn's body while he suffers from a heart attack and is taken to the hospital unconscious. Arn and Debbie return home, but Arn is left feeling a little unwell and eventually ends up murdering his landlord, stabbing him 22 times due to this demonic possession. Yeah, sounds pretty terrifying, doesn't it? His case becomes the first American murder trial to claim demonic possession as a defense. Well, sorry to break it to you, but this is literally a play-by-play of the events that actually happened. Yeah. Maybe not shot for shot, movie style, but the script and skeleton was there for sure. Arn was subsequently convicted after a messy murder trial, though he served only 5 years of a 10 to 20 year sentence. The case was huge. It attracted huge media attention and in fact was the first in history of the US claiming the paranormal as a defense. The couple went on to marry each other, and tell their story as the Warren side as well. Books, documentaries, and eventually this huge film universe. Yo, all of this just got way more scary, right? Like, I gotta rewatch all 8 parts. Who am I kidding? I'm not gonna watch them. I watch horror movies like this. You know?
Starting us off in at number 5, Annabelle. Here we have a clip of Lorraine Warren that's fairly recent, talking about the real-life Annabelle doll. Doll, which was given to a college student by her mother as a gift, turned out to be a doll that was manipulated by a demon in an attempt to possess her or her roommate. The events surrounding the doll and why Ed and Lorraine were brought in are eerie at best. It began with the doll moving around the house on its own, and even resulted in one of their friends being brutally attacked by it, with the doll strangling him. Here's what Lorraine had to say about it when the second film inspired by the doll, Annabelle Creation, came out.
Evil needs a body to go into, and if you're vulnerable, it's going to be you.
And at number 4, Amityville. Here we have a recording of Ed and Lorraine retelling their experience with the famous Amityville house in Long Island. Now at the time when they were called, they didn't realize that the house had been the location of 6 previous murders. Here's Ed describing what they experienced when they first got there.
We went into the house that day. We didn't realize that it was diabolically infested. He went to that shrine and he brought back from there a priest, an exorcist, who said masses in the house. Why? If this was a hoax that was created by the Lutz family, why 6 months before this man was murdered and his family was an exorcist in that house?
Eerie stuff. The Amityville horror case has long been criticized as being a hoax perpetuated by the Lutz family. But from what the Warrens claim, it was a sinister place long before the family had the unfortunate luck of moving in there. Up next at 3, the haunting in Connecticut. This particular case is concerned with a haunted funeral home, and it happened in 1988. The couple had gotten a call from the homeowners saying that they were being tormented by ghosts, to the point where the assaults were even sexual in nature. Now, the house had been converted from a funeral home to a regular house before they had bought it. Believing that necrophilia had occurred there in the past, the Warrens had this to say about what they discovered there.
The instruments they used for embalming, the embalming table, the chain hoist, everything was still there. But there was lumber all over. There was also what they called the sales coffin room, where they put the caskets.
And at number 2, the White Lady of Union Cemetery. In East Connecticut, there's a spirit that Ed and Lorraine had made various attempts to capture via psychic photography. According to Ed, people had claimed to see a lady in white walking around the cemetery, so the couple investigated it. Ed stayed in the graveyard for 7 nights, leaving his home around midnight each night, and waited with his camera. He tells of how on September 1st at 2:40 a.m., he saw the White Lady. Here's what he had to say about it.
I'm sitting there and I could see all these lights over near the Baptist cemetery, all around the stone wall, and all these thousands and millions of insects were just chirping away. All of a sudden things started to quiet down, and I could hear what sounded like a woman weeping. I took the camera out and I could see all these ghost lights suddenly forming into a figure of a woman.
He goes on to say that he wasn't able to see her through his camera, but only with the naked eye. He put his camera on his tripod and let it run, and tried to walk towards her, but she disappeared. So he backed away, and that's when she reappeared. He then saw some shadow ghosts holding her back from him. He claims that a shadow ghost then pushed her towards the road, and then she was gone. And finally, in our number 1 spot, Bill. The Enfield poltergeist is one of the Warrens' most publicized cases. It was the topic for the Conjuring 2 film, in which we saw the Warrens, played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, attempt to help the family rid themselves of spirits who were severely haunting them in the late 70s. The film actually used the audio recordings that the duo recorded while at the house as inspiration. Take a listen. As you can hear, the demon's voice is audible talking to Ed. The demon was possessing one of the 4 children, a girl named Janet, and the voice was said to have been called Bill. This is by far the most famous audio recording of the Warrens.
Number 5, Amityville. Believe it or not, there's actually 39 film adaptations made surrounding this case. Yeah, it's the OG case, the first crack at getting this terrifying formula down that we all love today. The Amityville Horror. Yes, the infamous haunting that took place on November 13th, 1974 at 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. Well, in some versions 108 Ocean Avenue. Places like that get really popular, you know? The Amityville Horror is a book by American author Jay Anson, published 1977, and it's also the basis of one of the scariest movies ever released from 1979 onwards. The paranormal experiences by the Lutz family has just led to great movies, you know? Spooky stories. It unfortunately has also led to controversy, lawsuits, name defacing, and of course murders and life sentences. But that was before all the media stuff. Hey, it was gruesome times. The LA Times said it was actually more hideously frightening than The Exorcist because it actually happened. DeFeo was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 life sentences. All of his parole appeals have been denied. For nearly 13 months after the murders, the house remained empty until it was bought by the Lutz family. And cue terrifying movie. When the Lutzes moved in, the furniture from the DeFeo family remained intact from the night of the murders. Yeah, they actually didn't know. They just thought it came furnished. That's a ripoff also, I'd be pissed. New couch smell? Nope, just ghost plasma. Yuck. The Warrens' most famous case was the Amityville haunting. This is where 6 members of the DeFeo family were found dead in their beds in 1974. A year later, the Lutzes moved in, and 28 days of this, basically. Also, let us know in the comments down below which Ed and Lorraine case scares the bejesus out of you the most. Like, which movie won't you watch, you know? I don't do dolls, dude. Annabelle gets me every time, I swear to God. Number 4, The Haunted. In 1991, the works of the late great Warrens was finally approached again after years of their demonic work had slowly and surely began to surface. They began fighting the good fight since the 40s, remember? With the success of the Amityville horror in the late 70s and the popularity it brought to the demonology topic within the US, the Warrens' name and reputation was finally appreciated, and they gifted us another gem of a story to film. This 2-hour, made-for-TV film based on the horrific events that took place within the Smirl home in the 80s. The Haunted, released by 20th Century Fox, earned itself 2 Golden Globe nominations. The case file of the Smirl's haunted house in Pennsylvania in the 1970s was infamous for not only demons, but a certain type of evil entity, the incubus and the succubus. This demonic pair usually haunts a sleeping person, and their possession is usually based around a more explicit manner of haunting. Yeah, Google it up, you'll get it. This film does a semi-tasteful 90s job at expressing what the Smirls were actually working with. Spoiler alert, it's pretty messed up. Demons almost quote-unquote breeding with those it possesses. The Smirls' version of their story was the subject of a 1986 paperback book titled The Haunted, of course, where this movie of the same name gets its inspiration from. The Warrens are introduced and explored for the first time in this film. Like many of the film adaptations, the Warrens are first seen performing college lectures into various hauntings. Lorraine is portrayed by Diane Baker. Ed is played by Stephen Markle. A pretty 90s feel to it, you know? Grainy, it's a little campy at times, but it's the first formula to this huge film franchise. Isn't it cool that Ed and Lorraine have been part of the modern horror scene for like 70 years? Their cases have been a part of the horror landscape way before Wan developed his Conjuring universe. Whether you believe in these cases or not, it's clear that they've made an impact. Number 3, Bill Ramsey. Okay, so these Warrens have covered it all. Ghosts, demons, succubuses, even vampires. I'd love to see a good vampire movie, you know? Just Juan takes it into his universe. I'd love to see it. But werewolves? Like, for real? No way. In the 80s, they were fascinated with this werewolf legend, so Lorraine and Ed Warren traveled across the world in search of a real-life wolf man. They watched a television program, Sightings, in which police officer and locals got interviewed about their encounters with a local werewolf, Bill Ramsey, in London, England. Bill himself was questioned about his abilities to take on men twice his size with ease, as he would rampage through the city, blacking out. Lorraine felt a strange connection to him after this, and after a short trip to London, she found Bill Ramsey's whereabouts. Through British police departments, Lorraine made contact. Lorraine and Ed discovered that unlike most werewolf folklore, he does not change physically every moon, or it wasn't a bite that originally caused him to transform. Bill Ramsey, according to Lorraine, was possessed by an evil wolf spirit and needed help with a full-blown exorcism. The Warrens brought Bill back to Connecticut to meet Bishop Robert McKenna of Our Lady of the Rosary Catholic Church, and he agreed to perform an exorcism for Bill. The exorcism was a success, and thanks to everyone, today Bill lives a pretty normal life. I'd hope so. This is terrifying. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, if that came to theaters, it would probably slap and horrify at the same time. Good problems, you know? Number 2, Japan tour. In the mid-1990s, Ed and Lorraine found themselves overseas in Japan, visiting Nagoya and Tokyo with a team of translators for a small tour of where Ed was stationed in World War II. And of course, some hauntingly terrifying demonic run-ins. First day, they went to see these haunted tunnels. Second day, they have haunted house run-ins with headless samurai. And thirdly, they witness and help out with a full-blown exorcism. Yeah, talk about a busy week. It's like a Warren 3-in-1 package deal. Their first day consisted of visiting a set of condo buildings apparently riddled with a ghost infestation. Beheaded samurai soldiers haunt the hallways, a ghostly couple and the woman ghost of the gallows haunt the premises. The second night, they visited a haunted salt mine tunnel. Ed said it was the scariest place he had ever been to. The tunnel had buried some odd 200 people alive when an avalanche caved miners in. Ouch. The third night consisted of this. That's right, a very, very unsettling, real exorcism. Okay, yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight at all. The Warrens sat in on 3 high priests of knowledge and spirituality known as disciples as they watched an apparent snake demon slither its way out of a person before their very eyes. And of course, this footage of a young woman speaking in not her first language, but tongues. Just moaning in agony. It's kind of hard to watch all that demonicness. Spooky level? 10 out of 10, 100%. And the number 1 spot, Maurice Thoreau. And we come to Maurice. This one is terrifying on its own. It doesn't need a 3D movie follow-up. Maurice Thoreau began to notice young he was able to do things that no other man is capable of. Superhuman strength, knowledge of more than his academia showed. He was different. He worked around New England for years doing odd jobs and yet suffering through several relationships. After a physical examination and psychological test failed to bring any solution to the situation, the Warrens were finally called in. The Warrens were gaining popularity as a paranormal aid and had already worked on several cases. The activity ranged from low-level poltergeist activity to this aggressive physical demonic attack stuff. Apparently one night while trying to recite the Hail Mary to make the possession stop, Maurice became so violent he even tried to choke out his own wife. The Warrens made the decision that this was not a normal haunting but a possession and would need the help from Bishop Robert McKenna, who agreed to perform an exorcism. After examining Maurice, Bishop McKenna performed the ritual right away. Dude, that's terrifying. He's just staring off like a reptile. Apparently the demon identified itself simply as, quote, "I am what I am." And also, of course, invoking the kingdom, referring to demons from the legions of evil type stuff. The exorcism was successful, thank God. A young French-Canadian character appears in The Nun, and is supposedly loosely based on the real Maurice, who the Warrens actually think might have been possessed by the devil himself. What do you think?